I've always been a little obsessed with a particular breed of choice-based games, particular ones around the PlayStation 2 era. I'm not talking about the sweeping Western RPGs where various skill checks and choices along a 60-hour playthrough leads to one of several endings, but the shorter, tighter time loop kind of games. Games like the slightly unhinged Shadow of Memories for the PS2, Radiant Historia for the DS, or more recently, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, witnessing narratives play out from different perspectives, peeling back context, understanding character motivations to piece together a more rounded story has this real intriguing quality. Pulling a game like that off is no small effort. It's ambitious, it doesn't always work, but I've always appreciated small studios trying their hand at creating a memorable experience. Which brings me to 2002's Way of the Samurai. Created by Acquire, recently coming off Tenchu 2, and subsequently losing that game's IP, they decided to try their hand at something new. It was a AA game, attempting to blend a jidaigeki samurai tale with bloody technical combat and a colourful cast of characters. The premise is simple. You, the Ronin protagonist, arrive in a village during its most formative 2 days. Caught between two warring clans, innocent villagers, and the government, your character can guide the hands of fate to bring ruin, salvation, or not much of anything to a town and its people. As the star of your very own Chanbara movie, what path will you have taken by the time the credits roll? Let's find out. When you mention developer Acquire, there are two camps of recognition people may fall into. The first is probably, are they the devs who made Tenchu? And the second is, didn't they make Octopath Traveler? For those that are familiar with Acquire from the Tenchu days, you may or may not know that Acquire developed the first 2 Tenchu games. After that, the rights were sold to Activision. Then K2 would create Tenchu Wrath of Heaven, etc. until FromSoft purchased the rights and had Acquire come back for the, at the time, Nintendo Wii exclusive Tenchu Shadow Assassins. If you look on the internet, both in English and Japanese, you'll find very little on the development of Way of the Samurai. However, if you were to, I don't know, purchase a Japan exclusive book on the development of Way of the Samurai, then you would have an insight into its development. And I'm talking about the insight that no one has yet been bothered to commit to the internet. You can grab the book off Amazon. It's genuinely an interesting read that charts everything before the game's inception, characters, story, engine choices, debugging, the whole shebang. But for the purposes of this summary, I'll just be cherry picking what I think are the most interesting and relevant pieces of information. With that said, we've ping-ponged back and forth through the timeline a little there, so let's begin just after Acquire had lost the rights to Tenchu after the second game. The company had a bit of a dilemma on their hands. What game should we create next? Don't forget, just on the horizon is the advent of a new console generation, the PlayStation 2. The floor was open to ideas. One of those ideas came from artist and designer Koshi Nakashi, who'd been with Acquire since the original Stealth Assassins, where he'd worked as an artist. Even before that, he'd been involved in another of Acquire's games, Real Fishing. The first idea that he brought to the table was, and I'm translating here, Saishu Heiki Ninja, the ultimate ninja weapon, or I suppose the final ninja. Basically, this ninja is the ultimate shinobi. The premise of the game would be that in the future, aliens have invaded the Earth, and the player character is one of the few survivors able to stand up to this threat. The game would take place in a large, open city, featuring wall running, building destruction mechanics, various weapons, and culminate with the player battling an alien in a UFO. Now, if you're familiar with ninja games, when you hear that pitch, a number of them may spring to mind. When I think of near future, wall running and aliens, my mind immediately leapt to Shinobi for the PS2. Granted, it's demons, not aliens, but the near future vibe is definitely there. Moreover, you may even be reminded of the From Software game Ninja Blade, which also sported an alien-like parasite enemy along with a futuristic vibe. However, while Nakanishi had stated that the game would be extremely different from Tenchu, there was some hesitation, namely from Acquire's publisher Spike's Mitsutoshi Sakurai. We'll get to who Sakurai is and what involvement Spike had in the project in a moment, but his advice was that Acquire should rely on its stoicism. And no, that's not a translation. Japan has the word stoic in its vocabulary, just as an English speaker would use it. Along with being all stoic about game production, Sakurai also said that Acquire's strength lay in its unique period setting of its games. Obviously, I've spoken about the Tenchu series at length, and what has always engaged me was Acquire's sense of mood and atmosphere, in particular how it blended with the historically inspired locations. With this in mind, Nakanishi's next idea was titled Chanbara Mode, seemed to tick all the right boxes. Let's take a slight divergence to quickly explain what Chanbara is. I've spoken about it before, particularly in my Tenchu videos. Simply put, Chanbara is a subgenre of jidaigeki films. The closest analog we have in the West would be the Western or swashbuckler genre of films. Jidaigeki films or period dramas refer to movies set before the Meiji period, which was 1868 onwards. These stories generally involve samurai, war, or ninjas. Thematically, these stories often covered samurai, their duty, ninjas, and how samurai in particular dealt with their standing in society changing. Japan was at peace mostly, so there was no need for a warrior class. The theme of change is prominently seen in films such as Harakiri. The subgenre of Chanbara is derived from two onomatopoeic words. First, chan refers to the sound of two swords clashing. Bara refers to the sound of a quick slash. When you hear chan, you may think of Samurai Champloo. Again, that first chan is the clash of weapons. Prominent films within this genre would be Kozure Okami, Yojimbo, Seven Samurai, and Zatoichi, to name a few. By combining Acquire's penchant for historical settings, the aim was to make a sophisticated period drama with samurai, or simply samurai, as it was known in Japan. With a plan in hand, Nakanishi and Takuma Endo would present it to Spike Entertainment. Endo, who, if you know about Acquire, watch my videos, or are just interested in the Tenchu series, is the president, founder, and executive producer of Acquire. From before Tenchu and beyond, he's had a hand in pretty much everything. Spike is also an interesting company for a number of reasons. Most people today may be familiar with Spike Chunsoft. That became the company name after the merger. Right now, in the early 2000s, we're pre-merger. At the time, Sakurai was the president of Spike. However, before Spike, he'd been part of Human Entertainment. Now that company is most famous for the Fire Pro Wrestling series and the Clock Tower series, though perhaps more famous for what companies they birthed upon bankruptcy. Spike as a developer is most famous for developing the Budokai Tenkaichi series, which many a teenager played late into the night. Grasshopper Manufacture is most well known for being a Suda51 company, having produced games like Killer 7, No More Heroes, and as of the time of writing, the upcoming Romeo is a Dead Man. So Nakanishi and Endo pitched the game to Sakurai. Therefore, Spike, Way of the Samurai was to be a game that would appeal to both casual and hardcore audiences by filling a niche in the genre bolstered by innovative mechanics. Big claims, but everyone knows during a pitch you need to position your game, film, product, whatever, as the second coming. Still, Sakurai and Spike remained apprehensive. Would it simply be a samurai version of Tenchu? Could they really make good on their promises of a reactive world? To soothe Sakurai's worries, Acquire had a few counter-arguments, one of which was bringing up a previously published Human Entertainment game, Neko Samurai. This captured Sakurai's attention, much like those feathers on a stick that cats love. Neko Samurai was, in essence, a visual novel set within the Edo period with a branching storyline. It would share striking similarities to what Way of the Samurai would become. In addition to Neko Samurai, the recently released Shenmue was also mentioned. Like Shenmue's reactive world, the focus would be both on the player driving events and the world reacting to both the player's action and inaction. Big, bold words that undoubtedly came with no small risk. However, Sakurai trusted Acquire. The intent from the get-go was that this wouldn't be like Capcom's Onimusha. Way of the Samurai was not a blockbuster movie, more like a TV movie. It was always envisioned to be a AA title. With that in mind, and to show commitment to the project, Acquire would fund 20% of the development costs. Sakurai would become the game's production manager. Production Division 2 was formed, where Nakanishi would act as division manager. Development for Way of the Samurai would commence in July 2000, with a release window aimed for the 2001 holiday season, just 14 months away. Way of the Samurai's development is a tale as old as time, at least in game dev terms. There's a Yiddish proverb, man plans, God laughs. Nowhere is this truer than in any kind of project development. Whether it's a car, building, party, or a game, rarely is it a smooth road. In Way of the Samurai's case, the team were dealing with engine problems, debugging issues, a clear vision coming from the game, coalescing in later development. It makes for a very stressful and tense environment. Many will say it's simply par for the course. What did you expect? In particular, when a new console generation has just been released, you may not have dev kits or are simply unfamiliar with the architecture. That's a given. Oftentimes in project development, it's more about adaptability rather than the plan itself. From the contents of the book and personal experience, there's a very palpable sense of Nakanishi's anxieties. It paints a picture of an ambitious man, driven by the need to eschew what he perceived as the modern trappings of games and, more specifically, RPGs. Personally, he cites his influences as the extremely popular Wizardry and Ultima series, which enjoyed an extremely strong foothold in Japan. Many are aware that it's these games which served as the foundation for hugely popular JRPGs, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest. Nakanishi wanted what he had dubbed a real-time drama simulator, even mentioning games such as Maxi's The Sims. Design pillars included players being allowed to act with a sense of freedom that would foster regret. What if I had answered differently? What if I'd acted differently? Player action would drive the narrative. He wanted a sword-fighting action experience that would take anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours to complete, and he likened the experience more to a sports or puzzle game. Along with the design pillars, there were a number of keywords that attempted to summarize Way of the Samurai, human relationship simulator, Chambara, MTV-style visuals, film noir that possessed a modern take on Bushido. All this would be set in a small town in 1887 during the Satsuma Rebellion, where the new and old ways intertwined. Characters would be possessed of their own goals, rife with subplots where silence is a valid action. As you can tell from all that, it feels like a mood board, something that you'd construct early in development to use as a foundation. Nakanishi's colleagues found it hard to grasp what Way of the Samurai was, and even Nakanishi himself couldn't articulate it. Frustration grew within the man and the team. This same ambiguity had risen within Tenchu too, but that turned out all right in the end. Would that old acquire magic come in to save the day once again? Pretty much. Sure, there was a bit of a delay and those aforementioned issues, but we can sit here and play today. While I don't think it's worth picking apart or covering the minutiae beyond what I've glossed over, the team did come out of the other side with a game. They were battered and broken, but they got the job done. Spike, Sakurai, and Endo's trust and collaboration with Nakanishi and the team paid off. Way of the Samurai was released on February the 7th, 2002 in Japan. By the end of that month, it had shifted around 200,000 copies, a certified hit. So what did the critics make of it? The PlayStation 2 review score for Way of the Samurai, according to the review aggregator Metacritic, sits at a fair 74. At the higher end of the review spectrum is Chikonglui's review for GameCritics.com. I think it serves as a cool reflection of what Nakanishi's intentions were and how that was perceived by the end user. Rather than Chambara, the reviewer draws on the likes of John Woo and the hard-boiled film as a parallel to the game's themes of loyalty and duty. He says, and I quote, "It's hard to paint an overall picture of the Way of the Samurai experience to the avid gamer, familiar with all the typical conventions and grammar of video games. When most games struggle to artistically register on the radar of even its own field, Way of the Samurai achieves a higher pedestal worthy of discussion and comparison. High praise not only for the game's narrative structure and replayability, but also for Way of the Samurai's depth of combat and willingness to eschew standard gaming conventions. Skirting the middle ground with a 6 out of 10 is the game's review in Edge magazine issue 116. The trappings of a small overworld, subpar graphics and lack of voiceover are brought up as negatives. However, under the surface emerge a number of positives. Here's a mashup quote. Featuring a somewhat unwieldy combat system, the ragged-looking samurai sim hardly screams for your attention, but while the look and feel of Way of the Samurai is generic at best, the central game mechanic is exquisite. Wherever you look, there's evidence of subtlety and care. The curious will find it an interesting martial art house alternative to Onimusha's box office blockbuster. Over at G4 TV, whose reviews have kind of become a tradition in regards to Acquire games, bestowed the game with a 60. For whatever reason, they tended to rather not be taken with some of Acquire's outings. Some review scores were more deserved than others, however. Reviewer Miguel Concepcion said it will be remembered as one of the year's most replayable games, praising the narrative choice, clunky if still fun combat, and showing enough unique traits to differentiate it from the Tenchu series. Overall, reviews often praise the game's narrative freedom and atmosphere. However, its combat, especially the camera's tendency to obscure the player, poorer graphics, and lack of voiceover were often brought up. What I do think is cool though is how many reviewers specifically brought up or recognized what Nakanishi and the team originally strove for, a game eschewing modern conventions, freedom of choice that slowly peels away a plot and reveals character depth and motivations. Developer intent being recognized can often be lost outside of reviews or analysis. I'll admit I rarely play a game, especially one I enjoy, and then reflect on the experience in terms of, was what I felt or experienced an express design goal? Outside of more prolific series and designers, your Kojimas, Miyazakis and whatnot, in earlier console generations, there was a real divide between developer and player. Outside of tailored interviews or magazine spreads, it was all a very controlled PR-led experience. Now, just like with celebrity, the advent of social media and ability of anyone to share their thoughts, those barriers separating the artist, their art, and consumers has all but disappeared. Hop on social media to see what Kojima thinks, listen to his podcast, search out developers' LinkedIn posts and Instagram reels to get a peek of what's going on inside their heads. It's refreshing in a sense, however, with everyone within social media touching distance, some of the mystique has been lost. Not to mention a small majority out there should have their internet access revoked and shipped to some remote hole for infinite losers. Got a bit sidetracked there, so I'll make it out of Snake Way and we'll head on to exploring Acquire's human relationship simulator. There is a quote often attributed to Leo Tolstoy: all great literature is one of two stories. A man goes on a journey, or a stranger comes to town. With Way of the Samurai, we are firmly in the latter's camp. Much like A Fistful of Dollars, which is in turn a remake of Kurosawa's Yojimbo, which is in turn, have we done a full 360, a reimagining of Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest and the Glass Key novels, Way of the Samurai sees the Ronin Kenji find himself in Rokotsu Pass. In this post town, he'll potentially become embroiled in a bitter conflict between two rival samurai clans and the innocent villagers caught in the middle about the fate of the town. With any good play or work of fiction for that matter, the setting is as much of a character as those that appear within it. Way of the Samurai anchors itself in a transformative period of Japanese history. From 1603 until 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate, a military government, had ruled Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu is perhaps the most well-known of his name. After his victory at Sekigahara, which is a great stage in samurai warriors by the way, his military government spread across Japan. Zipping a few hundred years into the future, another turning point for Japan was the end of Sakoku. The cliff notes is that Sakoku closed Japan off from the rest of the world. Of course, you had some exceptions, but think of that as countries and people slipping under the crack of a shut door. In 1853, the Perry expedition, commanded by Matthew C. Perry, basically blew the door off its hinges, opening Japan up for trade to the west. The 1800s marked a period of intense industrialization. I know that when I was a kid in school, we learned about the Industrial Revolution. Cities became giant smog-filled hellholes, centralizing industry and drawing in people from around England. In Japan's case, the end of Sakoku had elites turn their focus to industrializing their military complex, in fear of being taken over by the West. Japan would then model its military on various other Western countries. All the while, the likes of samurai, once prestigious and of high social standing, found their position crumbling. In 1877, Saigo Takamori led the final samurai rebellion against Japan's government in Tokyo. Known as the Satsuma Rebellion, it's during these events when Way of the Samurai takes place. How, why, and the effects of these samurai's position in society changing is a key theme explored in jidaigeki works. Some embrace the change. For example, this is when kenjutsu, the art of sword fighting, transformed into kendo, the way of the sword. No longer was it seen as a practical tool for engaging one's opponent in battle. It became focused on tempering the soul, learning discipline, patience. Many samurai became patron of the arts, authors. One of Japan's greatest authors, Natsumi Soseki, rose to prominence during this period. If you've ever taken a Japanese history class, language class, or even watched anime or read manga, you may have heard of his book, Waga Hayo wa Neko de Aru, referenced. On the film side of things, I generally feel jidaigeki falls into two categories: the more contemplative film about the death of the samurai class, and the more chambara side of things, where some dude gets sliced up like sashimi. While Way of the Samurai, through player choice, allows you to define what kind of jidaigeki film you're making, some storylines and plot threads evoke that sense of melancholy which comes with the physical and spiritual death of the samurai. We'll explore all the homages and references when we get to them, but for now we'll be taking our first step onto the Bridge of Fate. Before stepping foot on the Bridge of Fate, however, you'll first need to choose your Ronin with no name and name them. as well as choose their area-appropriate drip. Canonically, the protagonist is named Kenji, and the first face and clothing are technically lore accurate, though this was done for practicality more than anything else. The Bridge of Fate, not my nomenclature by the way, it's referenced as such within Way of the Samurai's official guidebook, an absurdly thorough tome that methodically explores every single aspect of the game. While I have no intention of doing this for any other plotline or environment in Way of the Samurai, I will do it for the very first location the player enters, the bridge, and by this, I mean laying out every possible scenario the player can experience within this screen at this specific time. I'll do this to highlight just how much choice is hidden, how much reactivity even those who have played the game before may not have experienced, and as a means to set the expectations for what is to come. As soon as you're given freedom, your first choice awaits. A girl flees across the bridge, pursued by a shaved-headed thug and his cronies. What are you gonna do? Help her? Help the thugs? Maybe you don't care about any of them. It's not your business anyway. You could simply decide to head across the bridge, maybe head off to the right past that daikon patch, see what's going on there. Take a look at the event flowchart for this bridge, which you can find in the official guide. You can ignore the Japanese, it's more about understanding the nuance surrounding your choices. If you like, you can start your journey down one of several ending paths. Your action or inaction, silence or conversation, violence or pacifism will alter not only your narrative journey, but how characters will perceive you. Like most first levels or areas in games, it serves as an encapsulation of the game's core design pillars. It's not like a vertical slice, which is more of a marketing or development tool for internal and external use, designed to show off the game's features. At the Bridge of Fate, you're going to learn a number of mechanics which feed back to Nakanishi and the team's objectives. Time is a factor. Help the girl or don't, events will still progress. They won't wait around for you. Conversation can often be as sharp as any blade. You're here to create your own jidaigeki film. I'm guessing most of us who played Way of the Samurai for the first time saw the girl, saw the thug, and thought, well, I'm supposed to save her, right? That's what the game wants. And that's bait. In fact, one could say that Way of the Samurai, much like Jack Donaghy, is
the master baiter.
Who doesn't want to save innocents and slay gangsters and be paraded around town as the hero? So let's do it. Okay, as you approach the bridge, you'll see the girl being swept up by the bald dude with the tattoo on his dome. This, we are soon to learn, is Subohachi. He seems to hold a candle for her. You bump into him, you're dealing with his thugs. You talk to him, you have options. The first two build your relationship with the girl. The third, you'll soon find yourself tied to the nearby train tracks, money stolen, and waiting to jump on an oncoming train that's final stop is the afterlife. So let's not do that. Besides, you're doing the girl a solid by not allowing Subohachi to whisk her away. You press the conversation. Anything but the final choice leads to a fight, but why would you back out now? You're now facing off with 3 of Subohachi's underlings. If they kill you, it's game over, GG. However, if your stamina just falls below 40%, you can beg for your life, though dying is more palatable. But if you've got the skills and send 2 of them to the Shadow Realm, the man himself will join in. You then have 2 points in the battle where, if your stamina drops low enough, you once again have the opportunity to grovel like a dog. If this isn't your first rodeo and you instead manage to bring the sword of justice down on Subohachi's egg-like head, not only will he be the one begging for his life, but it also builds reputation with him. You can choose to talk to him again, where, impressed by your skill, he'll extend an offer to join his house. If you accept, he'll then invite you over for tea. But because we're saving the girl and all, it's probably not proper to side with the people who just tried to cart her off. Or you can choose not to talk to him at all, or you could just stab Subohachi in the face. Whatever works. Subohachi will run off with his tail between his legs, leaving you with the freshly rescued damsel. It is at this point you can introduce yourself to the girl, who goes by Suzu, or just leave or stab her and she'll run off. But if you stick around and don't turn to violence, you can ask how she's doing. As a means of thanks, Suzu will invite you to a family-run restaurant, Amaguri, located in the area ahead. Accept her offer or don't. In this scenario, we're not ones to look free food in the mouth. Either way, she'll depart the Bridge of Fate. Okay, so let's wind back the spool of fate's threads like a frustrated seamstress, right back to the beginning of this entire ordeal. Now we can ask ourselves the question, what if we simply watch Suzu-chan get kidnapped? Remember, so far we chose to intervene in her capture, beaten Subohachi, refused to join his clan, and offered to visit Suzu later for a victory meal, all the while actively choosing to participate in conversation. For now, we'll take a more calculated approach to proceedings. Keeping our distance, we'll observe Suzu get thrown onto Subohachi's shoulder like a sack of grain. Where's he planning to take her? After crossing the bridge, he'll divert down a small slope and under a bridge. This doesn't look like it's going to end well for Suzu. Then, appearing from out of his shack like some afro troll, Suzu's rescuer appears. Don-san draws his sword and is ready to do battle to save her. Looks more like we've stumbled into his Chambara film. His idle pose and get-up does make him look like Tiger's ancestor from Tekken. You can sit by and watch both of them go at it, help Don, or even help Subahachi. Assuming you take the first option, the two will scrap for a while before Don's bested. Unfortunately, he'll always lose this fight. Afterwards, you can talk to both of them or not. Suzu will offer to fix up Don's wounds and the two will move on to the restaurant. If you talk to them, while you get no free lunch, you can introduce yourself to both characters and learn about Amaguri. But let's say you choose to step in and lend on a hand. Well, then you'll be facing off with Subahachi. You beat him, he asks you to join his house. If you accept, it's the same as before. Don and Suzu won't be too thrilled with that outcome, however. If you refuse, then Subahachi and what remains of his minions will scurry off. You can then catch up with Suzu and Don, or not. By wandering off, Don actually thinks it's cool because, as we'll soon find out, it fits his ideal of a true samurai. But say you chat, you can introduce yourself, agree to get some lunch, and get to know the local serfs. Alternatively, you can side with Subahachi. While you won't be able to kill Don nor Suzu, it will curry favor with Subahachi and his clan while decreasing your reputation with Don and Suzu on account of stabbing him. Through your action or inaction, malice or empathy, the Bridge of Fate provides you with several opportunities. Potentially protect the villagers and learn more about their plight, throw in your lot with Subahachi and see what their clan has to offer, do nothing, or perhaps discover a rarer opportunity to become familiar with the as of yet unmentioned rival house to Subahachi's clan. While the game offers ample opportunity to meet with them from the get-go, I'm guessing most players won't be familiar with this particular scenario. If you rewind your mind back to a few minutes ago, you'll remember that when Suzu is being carried across the bridge, you can ask Subahachi to join his clan. Your enthusiasm sees you robbed and tied to the train tracks. If you do nothing, you'll soon be transformed into a red mist. But if you call for help, a man and a woman can come to your rescue. This man is the leader of the rival house in Rokotsu Pass. One of Way of the Samurai's shortcomings is that it lays the groundwork for a number of intriguing characters and interpersonal relationships, but just never builds on it thoroughly enough. One aspect from the bridge section is how it chooses the faces of its main factions. Tormented villagers and underdog samurai are easy for us to sympathize with. It fits the paragon mode of play that the majority of us choose in RPGs. We want to be the good guy. Subahachi's actions are cartoonishly deplorable. He's a dick. That's easy to see. Easy to build animosity towards him and his faction, or single him out as your evil mode playthrough. That confrontation directly leading to a meeting with another faction and its leader who, by comparison, seems empathetic and affable, naturally has us leaning towards them in the upcoming conflict. One of Way of the Samurai's biggest benefits is its repeat playthroughs and ability to delve deeper into characters. Kind of like the Nier games, there's something special about revisiting a scenario armed with previous knowledge and experience that fundamentally changes not only how you see the past but shape the future. Way of the Samurai isn't as good as Nier, not by a long shot, but it's still engaging. As we play, you may find your perceptions and allegiances change, influencing your pursuit of what you consider to be your perfect narrative. With that said, I think it's best to view the game through its endings and the journey required to reach them, rather than listing off a bunch of choices. We'll do this through exploring factional endings and the alleged ultimate path, digging into other aspects of Way of the Samurai along the way. We've already taken our first step towards the culmination of the Station People ending, so let's see what kind of sweater we can knit with the threads of fate. Reaching certain endings in Way of the Samurai requires the player to cross numerous point-of-no-return thresholds that lock the narrative to certain tracks. At the start of the game, the routes you can take are plentiful. Some branch off, others are rather linear, like pachinko balls tumbling down all those little pegs. Eventually, it arrives at a singular destination. You have 2 days, split into morning, afternoon, evening, and night, to explore your options, forge your alliances, or simply hack people to death. Like the majority of Way of the Samurai's endings, the final no takesy-backsies point of no return occurs on the second day, with us having either saved Suzu ourselves, helped Don in his attempts to rescue the girl, or simply ignored them and headed across the bridge. The next significant step towards this ending sees you visit the restaurant Amaguri. Amaguri itself lies within what the game confusingly calls Station. The game's translation requires its own section, believe me, but you may wonder why station is called this. I know I did the first time I opened up the game's map. There's no train running through this area, we should know. In a past life we were tied to the tracks. The reason is the word shukuba. It means post town. Even if you're fluent or native in the English language, unless you've looked into the Meiji Edo era or the English transportation system, post town won't mean a whole lot. However, chances are you've seen them. If you've ever played an open world game, say The Witcher 3 or Oblivion, read a fantasy novel, watched a TV show, a character on their journey to a big city will have stopped off the road to a small town. You can rest, get something to eat, maybe stay at an inn. These hubs served as connective tissue between major cities and trade hubs. In Japan, during the Edo and Meiji period, they were often located along the 5 highways of Japan. Even today, people often take tours to famous and/or restored post stations around the country, such as Nakasendo in Nagano. In a post town like the one in Rokotsu Pass, you'll find an inn, a restaurant, maybe some kind of administrative office. There's even a koban, a police box. Aesthetically, like a number of locations in Way of the Samurai, they are serviceable, graphically speaking. I figure they're like a community theatre group who made a bunch of props for their big annual show. The only building worth your time is Amaguri, where you'll find Don, Suzu, and some old dude looking for a massage in the back. One cool thematic detail I like about specifically making this place a shukuba is that it adds another layer to the world. I've mentioned before that jidaigeki works often focus on the transition occurring not just between the samurai class, but Japan and its industrialization and militarization as a whole. There's the reason why the invention of highways and whatnot, so those little cafes and mom and pop diners go out of business. No one's traveling through that way no more. And it was the same with the shukuba. The very train that is running through Rokotsu Pass, and the player occasionally, is killing the townspeople's livelihood in just a few years, and now by the looks of it, there will be no customers and no life to be had here, left behind to evaporate like the puffs of steam from a smokestack. If you head into the diner, you can chat with both Don and Suzu. She was made an orphan thanks to the recent Boshin War. From 1868 to 1869, the Tokugawa shogunate, who was in power at the time, fought a coalition whose aim it was to seize power in the name of the imperial court. I covered a variation of this in my video on Zipang and Seven Blades. More well-known works covering that period would be Shinsengumi, Rurouni Kenshin, and The Last Samurai. Suzu was taken in by the walking corpse that is Kurikichi, a man whose body is slightly less feeble than his mind. We must protect him at all costs. If you save Suzu, she'll thank you and make good on her meal. The funny thing is, the path that leads to actually eating is the third option. If you pick the first, Old Man River will shout out for a massage, and a full stomach will be a fading memory. During the conversation, you'll be interrogated by Don. On later playthroughs, to speed things up, you can tell him to shut up and eat. Don, full name Donald Donatellos, was, to my surprise, British. That explains the whole living under a bridge like a troll. In fact, I earned a bunch of self-awarded weeb points when I went to his shack and saw a blurry, pixelated picture nailed to his wall. I thought, I've seen that image before. I went to Google, typed in Masashi Miyamoto, and had my suspicions confirmed. Along with the Dutch guy who dressed in samurai gear, Don, or Donna as he likes to be called, is truly an OG weeb. He came to Japan on business but fell in love with the country and the samurai code. Meeting the protagonist is like one of those idol events for him. Plus, he's a true passport bro with eyes for Suzu. Just as that meal was ready to be served, a couple of punks bust in and start causing a ruckus. They're accompanied by Soichiro Shiritoku of the Kurou family, the same family that Subohachi belongs to. He wants Suzu and the old man out. You can follow the way of the pacifist and do nothing while they make a pretty pathetic attempt to destroy the shop. It mainly boils down to them throwing chairs, pots, and the maneki-neko around the place for far too long. Or you can step in and tell them to get lost. Doing so ends up with you drawing swords. After slaying one of them, Shiritoku himself will join in. You can obviously die here, but if you're victorious, Shiritoku will recognize your skill. Like Subohachi, he'll extend an offer to join the Kurou family. Of course, we refuse and Shiritoku scurries off. If you stick around, Don and Suzu will implore you to help defend the shop, Seven Samurai style, though they're not forthcoming as to why the Kurou family are so interested in the restaurant in the first place. This event acts as one of the levers that pushes the story forwards. When you next leave the area, the game will cycle into the afternoon. It's only when these transitions occur that you're able to save the game. And it's not saving your progress, it's just an opportunity for you to quit and come back later. A number of reviewers did cite this as a minor annoyance, but because the game is relatively short, I never found it that much of a hindrance. Now, while there are a number of actions and event paths you can take towards the next transition tonight, it makes sense for this ending to stick to things most directly related to the characters of Don, Suzu, and Kirikuchi. You can find the would-be samurai on the bridge where he's composing a haiku for a certain lady, as he puts it. Being a samurai in Japanese speaker means that your character can pull on the depth of their knowledge and experience to help choose a fitting end to the haiku. For those that don't know, a haiku is a short Japanese poem that traditionally has 3 phrases with a 5-7-5 syllabic structure. They typically reference the seasons, a fleeting moment, that kind of thing. One of the most famous and contested examples is Matsuo Basho's frog haiku, contested because it's being translated a ton. It goes,
古池や買わず飛び込む水の音
Alan Watts' translation is pretty good. The old pond, a frog jumps in, plop. Just like Ghost of Tsushima, you can create your own sick haiku with endings such as an eternal love, a crushed dream, an omelette with rice. The correct answer is obvious, but it's also the only one that conforms to the normal haiku pattern. Don will thank you and then move on. While not mandatory, the next part makes proceedings somewhat easier and involves heading to the local jinja shrine. For such a small place, it's packed with quite a bit of atmosphere. I'm no expert on shrines, and because this one is technically on a mountain, I'm not sure if it has an actual honden, where the kami god is enshrined, or if it's just an altar of some sort. Sometimes there's a sacred tree or rock. I'm leaning towards the former because of a point I'm about to make in a moment. There's also a giant Buddha statue which toppled over at some point, and of course the Torii Gate. The shrine itself reminds me of Hakusanjima Island's shrine. It seemed about the same size and had a ridiculously long staircase. If you examine your environment a little closer, you can also see what's known as a waraningyo, or voodoo doll, nailed to a tree. These waraningyo can trace their origin back to before the Edo period. To enact the ritual, you first need to make the doll from straw, then attach something of the person to the doll like hair, or in the game's case, I think, maybe a photo of one of the devs. But let's pretend someone in the game did it because I have an inkling who it could be. So with the doll created, you must then visit the shrine at the time of the ox, or Ushi no Toki Mayuri. Ushi is the word for ox, no Toki means the time of, and Mayuri in this context is a shrine visit. You need to wear white, an iron crown decorated with 3 lit candles, and bring a hammer and 5-inch nails. You go there between 1 and 3 AM and drive a nail into the figure and the shrine's sacred tree. You do this every night for 7 nights and make sure you're not seen doing it and the person in question will die. Simple. The shrine does serve as a stage for a number of narrative paths down the line, but for now we're here to meet a specific NPC. While Toyoko will appear in a number of other places in the game, he's here now and is willing to tell us a secret about the Kurou mansion if you can defeat him in combat. The fight itself is fine, and you can even have him spill his guts twice by slaughtering him after. He'll tell you that there is a secret entrance to the Kurou compound along the right hand side, though why would we need to know that? The next stop sees you return to the town. Kurikichi is having a run-in with one of the local thugs, it would appear. If you've not guessed it by now, the old man is pretty much suffering from dementia. The bully is from the Akadama clan. He talks big, saying they'll soon seize control of the entire country. Kurikichi professes his innocence and gets a boot in return. Luckily, the local constabulary is here to help, I guess. If you go over, the punk will get scared and scarper. If you're not quick to depart, you'll also be accosted by the police officer, Inokashira, but he's not important right now, we'll save him for later. Suffice to say, he doesn't seem too interested in upholding the law. Leaving the area brings about another change in time. It's now night. Susu rushes back home to the restaurant to find Kurikichi injured, but for her sake says he just fell down. This is watched on by a rather buff-looking dude who proclaims the Kurou, Akadama and officials are all corrupt. This is Gunji Dojima. Chances are, if you've explored the map, you'll run into him. He's the local blacksmith who can upgrade your weapons or even send them to storage. For the most part, he's a bit of an enigma, but not for long. Returning to the town once again, you'll be stopped by Suzu. Don has rushed off to the Kurou mansion for reasons unknown. We're going to pull him out of this hole. Unfortunately, some of the Kurou family's thugs have overheard and upped their defenses. As far as I know, there's no way to avoid this. At the mansion, it's like Final Fantasy VII's infiltration of Shinra Tower. You can take the path of least resistance or storm in the front. It makes no difference. If you want to go on a rampage, hack away. You'll find Don in one of the back rooms of the mansion. He claims that he broke in here with the intention of stealing the Kurou family's safe. Suzu's poor and money is the only way she can make it out of this town before it's too late. If you have Don carry the box, he won't be able to help you if you run into any resistance. Chances are you'll be fighting your way out of here, in no part thanks to his god-awful AI. He got stuck between a lamp at one point, the buffoon. But once you eventually make it out, you'll arrive in Ippon Matsu. Ippon is one long object, while Matsu is a Japanese pine tree. The reason it's called this is pretty self-explanatory. This is also where Dojima's forge is located. Taking a midnight stroll is the leader of the Kurou family, Teshin. He can be avoided by skirting around the left side of the area, however he's worth crossing swords with. Regardless if you have the safe, Don will join in the fight. And it's a decent one too, not least because if you succeed in dropping his health, he'll flee, leaving his awesome sword behind for you to pick up. But if you lose, you actually won't die. Just as he's about to deliver the killing blow, one of his lackeys will run up. Urgent news. Murasaki's body has been discovered at the shrine. It's enough for Teshin to sheathe his sword and let us escape with our lives, but not the gold. Defeating him brings about the same conclusion. A dead Murasaki, but a bunch of gold for us. Teshin, Don and ourselves weren't the only ones in Ippon Matsu though. Dojima was watching proceedings and was impressed with our bitching skills. Back at the town, Don apologizes to Suzu, the girl thanks us, and we get our share of the haul. Then Dojima pops up again. He seems to want to drag us into whatever he's scheming. Not only that, in classic RPG fashion, there's someone in an elevated position talking to themselves, who Dojima recognizes. I still think the Trail series has the best instances of these. You're then on to the second day. Well rested, you'll find Dojima outside of Amaguri. He's got a proposition for us. If you've been tangentially observing events, you'll understand there are two factions who don't like each other very much. Some may have either been crossing swords as you've been wandering around. Shiritoku wants Suzu out of the restaurant business. But why? Dojima will fill you in. The Kurou and Akadama are feuding over control of Rokotsu Pass. However, there's someone working behind the scenes to fan the flames of conflict. We've got to take him out. Dojima mentions a Hyuga of the Akadama clan, whoever that is. That's just a facade. This Hyuga is actually a spy for the Meiji government. Gasp, I guess. Before Japan opened its doors, Dojima fought in the military. He crossed paths with this Hyuga on the battlefield. Not only that, when you factor in that the Akadama only appeared in this pass a month ago, like the painting on Awagumi's walls, it starts to smell a little fishy. Hyuga wants both clans to fight for the government's end. What's worse is that the innocents of the town, literally 3 people, will get caught in the crossfire. Unfortunately, even defeating the clans wouldn't stop the suffering if the government's waiting to swoop in. If you reject role-playing as a cool samurai wanting to help people and instead decide to flirt with Suzu, Dojima will get pissed, which is pretty fun. The plan is for you and Dojima to make Hyuga talk. Lucky for us, he's just a scene transition away back at the Bridge of Fate. Here, the man himself will appear with some ninja as backup. Hyuga will admit his complicitness and then everyone's hacking at each other. A pretty fun battle that has its fair share of jank because of the level geometry. After Hyuga's lost a bunch of health, he'll spill that Kurou and Akadama have already been battling. Both sides are worn out, suffering major casualties. As the sound of conflict increases, the station and the pass as a whole is already steeped in chaos. Hyuga, and by extension the government, will be able to capture the foundry without resistance, whatever that means. You arrive back in the village just in time to see a bunch of government bootlickers. They're under the command of someone named General Tamagawa. Both the Kurou residents and the Akadama have been subdued too, and for reasons I never really understood aside from adding drama, Suzu's captured by government forces and taken to the Kurou mansion. You and Dojima will face off with a bunch of government agents. The guy can really go to town with that hammer. After the first wave, Dojima will implore you to rescue Suzu. If you fight with him, he'll call you an idiot and eventually get himself injured. This is so he can't help you in the final fight. Depending on whether you help Don on his little night infiltration, he'll appear in Ippon Matsu. He has one of the best text lines in the game. Like with Dojima, you'll fight the first wave until the second turns up. The cop from before, Inokashira, seems to have been working with the government all along. For his betrayal, he is then swiftly betrayed. It's quite cathartic. Don tells you to go on ahead. Like before, he won't feature in the next battle regardless. If you'd fought the Ronin to open the path before, it'll be open once again. You can circumvent the guards to come across one of the most metal scenes I've ever seen in a game. Suzu's legs have been bound to 2 oxen. You can imagine what the plan is. If you'd rather not hear the short history of this, then skip to this timestamp. Good? Okay. This method of execution is called ushizaki, or ox splitting. While it was more prominent in the Sengoku, Warring States period, it survived into the early Edo era. The oxen would have a bale of wood attached to their back. It was then set ablaze, leading the oxen to panic, gallop, and split the person in twain like a human Kit Kat. If you've watched Hell's Paradise, Jigokuraku, or read the manga, this method is used on Gabimaru to no effect. To use such a method on Suzu is obviously barbaric. It is unconscionable.
I mean, this guy was a real jerk.
As the Ronin hero, we've got to take this guy down. Although Don and Dojima are out of action, if you head under the bridge just before confronting Tamagawa, you can find a familiar face, Subohachi. At first, he mistakes you for a dog of the shogun. Kill him if you like, or give him a redemption arc of sorts, and allow him to fight beside you. Chances are you'll need all the help you can muster. Subohachi will chastise Tamagawa for trying to steal his woman. Despite the insult, he's happy for his underlings to tangle with you and Subohachi for the time being. It's only when you've slaughtered enough of them will he deign to step in and finish the job himself. The last showdown with Tamagawa is a fun one, not least because of his combat style and constantly being hounded by his remaining troops. As with most fights, where you have a helper in Way of the Samurai, the other person does a fine job of getting in your line of sight or outright gutting you mid-combo. To make things somewhat easier, you can lure Tamagawa to what I call the Shed of Death. Strangely reminiscent of Tenchu 1, you can often face off with the general alone. The other AIs have difficulty crossing the bridge or will be busying themselves with Subohachi. When the final blow is struck, Tamagawa will collapse. Kurou Ending slides. You have just enough time to rescue Suzu. More reinforcements are already on the way. Soon the mansion is flooded. It's not long before the previous night's surprise attack fully wipes out both the Kurou and Akadama clans. The only small victory is that you managed to slay the general and escape with the residents of the station and Subohachi. Thus, you have earned ending number 2. As for unlocking ending number 3, well, you do everything the same, except you literally don't talk to Subohachi. This, kind of crazily, has a greater impact on the ending slide than you may think. By not teaming up with Subohachi, it's implied that Don, Subohachi and Dojima all perish, or at the very least, don't make it out at the same time as you, Suzu and Kirikuchi. So, bad luck for them I guess. Maybe the others from the Kurou or Akadama factions will have better luck. But before checking those endings out, let's take a look at Way of the Samurai's combat. Combat in Way of the Samurai is both deep and convoluted. Compared to Acquire's previous efforts, Tenchu 1 and 2, it's much improved and quite straightforward. You draw your blade, have a light and heavy attack, a block, and a jumping attack. Naturally, light attacks are quicker, best thrown in just before an enemy attacks or to chip away at your opponent's stamina. Heavy attacks are slower, deal more damage, and are more of a risk to execute. The moment-to-moment gameplay of combat is more akin to fighting games of the time than beat-em-ups. Elements like spacing, blocking, countering, and waiting for openings become more of a tactical focus at higher difficulties. If you're not actively attacking, you're either attempting to create an opening via various methods. Most weapons have the ability to throw out a kick, which can leave your foe momentarily open. You can dodge, often tricky, or attempt to counter and push your opponent. Pushing can be done both forwards and backwards by timing a block with an enemy strike and tapping the analog or directional button in a direction. This can potentially lead to an opening to get a hit in, and it's not just blocking where this push mechanic comes into play. If you're hammering an enemy with attacks, you can push within a combo in an attempt to throw your opponent off guard. However, the most difficult technique is what the guide dubs the Mikiri, or the Awase. If you're a fan of Sekiro, then you'll be familiar with the Mikiri counter that can be executed in that game. Essentially, you're not blocking an enemy's attack, you're avoiding it completely, feeling the rush of wind as a blade sails inches from your pixelated face. I'll be the first to admit I am not great with Way of the Samurai's brand of combat. This is a difficult technique to pull off, executed by tapping a block just before an attack hits. The enemy, however, will actively flex this skill like those interior ministry ninjas in Sekiro. But if you're successful, you can not only completely evade an attack, but there's a chance you will add that move to a list for your equipped sword that will allow you to evade that move like Neo every time it's used. Keep in mind, this isn't a global list and there are over 160 moves on this list just for each weapon. Good luck finding them for everyone. Speaking of move lists, each weapon in the game has to some degree a unique set. Broadly, weapons are divided into a number of categories based on their stance: up, middle, down, side, one-handed, ninja, and unique weapons. The stance itself doesn't change a whole lot. Think of it more like choosing a character to play as in a fighting game. You want someone quick with a lot of agility, go for ninja swords or one-handed blades. You want solid fighting like a Paul Phoenix, stick with a middle or high stance weapon. Broadly, if a sword is within a stance category, then its moves list generally follow that same pattern. The Chuyoto, your starting weapon, and middle stance sword may not differ wildly in attack philosophy, as a green katana you can pick up on higher difficulties. However, swords that the named NPCs tend to use have moves unique to them. Don, for instance, can breakdance with his sword equipped. As you'd imagine, that sounds like a lot of swords and a lot of moves. You'd be right. Chances are you'll be on a run and come across a character that has a moveset you'd like to try. This often requires you to have defeated a character or gravely injured them in specific gameplay scenarios. I love this mechanic because it's like a little puzzle. Just how do you get into a scenario that provides you with that opportunity? It reminds me of SmackDown Just Bring It for the PS2. In that game, during story mode, depending on the choices you make, you unlock special SmackDown cards. These can be anything from hidden characters, movesets, and cosmetics. Kind of like Way of the Samurai, there were lots of different paths to be taken, making trying to track down all the secrets a ton of fun. Take Don's sword for example. To get it, when you head to the Kurou mansion at night, you can just kill him then and there, or let the guards do it for you. Or if you're playing the complete Japanese version, even if you're not following Don's path, he'll still go about his midnight jaunt and run into Teshin. If you then challenge Teshin, you can kill Don and rob his blade. Obtaining weapons can, at times, be rather straightforward, but there are instances where you're faced with taking a step back and detaching yourself from gameplay conventions. Granted, this is often just, I'm gonna stab him, but it's charming nonetheless. Many weapons can also take a bit of time to learn their intricacies. Technical blades like the ones the ninja use or the rapier are flashy, but require you to hone your skills before taking them into battle. Then you have truly wackier weapons like a magical rod or an axe or a saw, which, while conforming to one of the major categories, often have their own powerful or strange abilities. The choice can feel overwhelming, and honestly it kind of is. One of the major criticisms I have with Way of the Samurai is how it handles learning moves. Every new weapon you acquire comes with a handful of basic attacks, but around 60 to 70% of them must be learned. So even if you've learned all the attacks for a middle stance sword, the moment you get your hands on a new one, you'll have to learn them all again. If you're playing normally, it can take 2 to 3 playthroughs to acquire all moves. This actively hinders experimentation in a game that provides you with an insane amount of choice. What I would have preferred is something like a global mastery stat. For example, the more you use a middle stance weapon, your overall mastery of that stance increases, therefore globally unlocking moves within a stance's moveset. Normally, swords have a hidden experience meter that will increase when you successfully attack an opponent, kill them, perform a perfect block, or at low health, which is all fine. You can even pick up blue scrolls that will randomly teach you a move. That's all fine too, but it's still extremely tedious. Unless you really lock into a specific sword, which there can be other drawbacks to, it's very difficult to get a well-rounded picture of what weapon may suit your style. I found myself drawn to weapons like Teshin's Dai Kuronama and similar weapons within that up stance family. They tend to have broad, sweeping or thrusting capabilities, the latter of which is extremely important. There was also Kicho of the Akadama family's Kamikaze, which is quick, possesses really good combo potential. Then there's Chelsea's, also of the Akadama, Binetsu, which is a cool aura farming weapon with a technical juggling moveset. Finally, I went with the Unga Bunga build, which is basically your axes, saws and naginatas, whose moves can output some serious damage. On higher difficulties, where the samurai's combat demands that you take its lessons seriously and utilize your entire repertoire of skills. On hard and even normal difficulty, simply wailing on an enemy often bears little fruit. You're often better keeping your distance, strafing, utilizing your thrusts and pushing mechanics, or trying for the awase if you're brave enough. If you don't, it really is a recipe for frustration. Normal thugs will embody the spirit of Miyamoto Musashi, perfectly blocking or evading your every attack like some Dragon Ball Z character before deleting half of your health bar. I found on hard mode that you really have to enter each fight with an extremely cautious and calculated outlook. Never overexert yourself, always keep moving, and always wait for the opponent to move first. While rewarding, when every battle is like that, it can become exhausting. Sure, there's a skill issue on my part, but you really are punished on hard for not slicing through your opponents in mere seconds. Oftentimes you'll be fighting side by side with a companion, while all enemies only attack one at a time, because one is a CPU ally Dum-Dum and the other is the reincarnated spirit of Ashura embodying a generic NPC. They get rolled on in an instant, and that's if your ally just hasn't decided to outright stab you in the face by accident with some ridiculously acrobatic move. But perhaps my biggest gripe with Way of the Samurai's combat is its camera. The thing is the true final boss of the game. When you're in battle, it would rather just position itself behind a random bit of scenery or show the back of an opponent's head. I got sick of seeing Don's afro, or doing anything but focus on your targeted opponent. Oh yeah, good luck targeting an opponent. there's no way for you to switch your target. So if you just want to focus on a boss, you have to awkwardly run around, aim an attack in an enemy's direction and hope it connects. Extremely frustrating on high difficulties, where one move from the enemy can clip through half of your health. Another ridiculous how did someone not catch this in testing aspect is that oftentimes during cutscenes, events will progress and end in a fight. Your opponent draws their blade within the cutscene, and you, well, you're just stood there, hakama, around your ankles with a big sign saying stab me. 90% of cutscene battles start with you having to draw your blade when your opponent is right next to you. What happens? Say bye-bye to a chunk of health. Thanks for playing. Off to the start menu. It is baffling. One thing that can maybe help you last longer in the hellscape that is Rokotsu Pass is the ability to upgrade weapons. Stat growth isn't tied to a character but a sword, another misstep. If you have to unlock moves for every new weapon you get, you also have to upgrade its attack, defense, durability, and life to make it viable. You do this by visiting Dojima at his forge. You're then presented with several options. Durability is the most straightforward. It will increase up to a maximum of 5 the heat your sword can stand to accumulate. In a sense, a stamina bar heat accumulates when you attack and block. If it completely fills, your sword partially breaks. You break all the bars, your sword is now basically ineffective. I think it's a fairly simple way of adding another layer of depth to the game's battle systems. It forces you to be much more cautious in not only your attacks, but your blocks. Simply going ham with a weapon, particularly a weapon special move, is often a quick way to destroy your most prized possession. While upgrading this is rather trivial, it's the other stats like attack, defense, and vitality that pose an issue. Not only is there an associated cost with the upgrade, which is fine, but it's often random by what degrees an item will improve, if at all in the case of vitality. While on high levels and at later points in the game, enemies will drop specific stat upgrading items to make this easier. Having to do this for every blade you're invested in before it's viable to properly use is tedious. It requires a lot of money, which requires multiple playthroughs, or for a sword you may not end up loving. Again, it's just another bit of friction or experimentation. Let the player find their fun as easily as possible. With all that said, I was honestly surprised Acquire managed to pull this combat system out of the bag after Tenchu 1 and 2. When compared with that game, the difference is night and day. There certainly is an interesting and surprisingly in-depth combat system that rewards a player sharpening their skills. The issue is that Way of the Samurai throws up a bunch of hurdles to impede you from taking those steps. I'm sure there were players out there turned off by having to grind moves and a virtual grindstone, risk losing everything if they die, battle with an annoying lock-on system and camera, all to find which weapons fit their playstyle. But if you persevere or just grab a save with everything unlocked, it can be a ton of fun. The next tale in our Chanbara epic sees us siding with the Kurou clan while they attempt to seize control of Rokotsu Pass, while also putting down the new upstart Akadama faction, an old school tale of attempting to hold back the inevitable tide of progress that would wash the samurai away. I'd say the Kurou clan wouldn't be most players' first choice of a faction to side with. If you start on the bridge, the only way to gain access to the clan is through tangling with Subohachi. This option opens up to you if you either demand he release Suzu, attack him, or end up helping Don rescue Suzu. The player is deliberately not given a positive review of Subohachi and, by extension, the Kurou clan right off the bat. Most of us would agree that kidnapping does not positively contribute to society. Subohachi is arrogant, cocky, quick to anger. Most of us when playing games statistically play as the good guys. It's a power fantasy. We want to save the world. I remember the outcry from some of the fan base when Dragon Age The Veilguard basically did away with evil choices. That game had a number of flaws, but that wasn't one of them. Why spend a huge chunk of dev time constructing an evil path if a paltry amount of players will follow it? Way of the Samurai, however, is all about choice. Even if you ignore Subohachi on the bridge, you have other opportunities to join the Kurou clan. You can hop over to the restaurant later and join in on the destruction, attack Shiretoko and receive an offer that way, or simply roll up to their mansion and ask to join. For the purpose of this playthrough, and all playthroughs will sport a different model to make them more distinguishable, I chose to help Don but spare Subohachi. He'll tell you to swing by the mansion. It should be apparent to the player that they are engaging in the evil path. In Ippon-matsu, you can garner a little backstory on the Kurou family and the current goings-on in Rokotsu Pass. The faction intends to hand over a factory, but there's also something brewing between the Akadama clan too. In the previous Station People ending, While we generally shirked any involvement with either faction, come the second day, you may have witnessed both clans randomly battling each other in the streets. At the Kurou clan's mansion, Subohachi will recognize you if you cross paths before, and usher you inside. Slightly tangentially, there's no way to progress dialogue once it's begun. You have to sit there and watch it play out. Interacting with a person is on the circle button, whereas confirmation is done through the X or cross button. Though through muscle memory, I'm constantly pressing the X button from time to time, thinking it'll advance a line, but it just ends up with my character doing their best impression of a Jack in the Box. Anyway, you head to the front of the residence to find Teshin and a woman. From endings 2 and 3, we already know who Teshin is, though we've yet to see or speak to the woman. She wishes to test our might. If you run through a number of dialogue options, it soon becomes clear that her attitude and potential role in the story is very Lady Macbeth. She's curt, arrogant, and possesses a frosty personality. Safe to say, the Kurou family aren't putting their best foot forward. If you probe further, you discover her name is Murasaki. She's Teshin's wife. Now, where did we hear that name? Oh yeah, during the fight with Teshin after helping Don pilfer their safe. Murasaki's body was found by the shrine on the night of the first day. Wonder what happened there. There are a number of these cool crumbs of dramatic irony or context pieces you acquire as you wander down the game's various pathways. As I mentioned before, seeing these fall into place and provide a greater picture of the narrative is quite satisfying. I mean, it's not hard for us, given our brief time with Murasaki, that someone could conceivably want her dead, feud with the Akadama clan notwithstanding. The test she has in mind for us is a duel with Shiretoko, essentially Teshin's right hand. We met him in the last playthrough, where he came to redecorate Suzu's eatery. The battle with him is rather straightforward. You just attack until his health reaches a certain threshold and don't die. What's interesting is that, depending on your performance, the money that you receive from Murasaki will differ. If you take a lot of damage, constantly wander out of the arena and generally play unskillfully, your reward diminishes. I think it caps out at around 70-ish Ryo. Shiretoko as an opponent is quite fun. His lower sword style is snappy. He also has this attack where he grasps his forehead like he's had one too many cuts of sake before stabbing you. And Shiretoko's grab attack where he downs you and then thrusts his sword into your spine only to wiggle it around makes it look like he's vigorously stirring soup. After collecting your reward, Murasaki will let you in on the next mission, driving the people out of the station. It's quite clear that she considers herself the mastermind behind the Kurou family, with Teshin more of the face of the operation. While you can head straight to the shrine for the rendezvous, sticking around provides a little more background to the situation in Rokotsu Pass. Teshin and Murasaki discuss the foundry. While it appears he was once hesitant to sell it, for whatever reason he's come around. With no other choice, a government official is scheduled to arrive in the pass tomorrow. Teshin, in true jidaigeki style, laments the fact that the time of solving one's problems with a blade alone has long since passed. Murasaki seems to imply that the Akadama clan actively wish to destroy the foundry. Selling it off to the government should provide them with a comfortable life, especially little Kintaro, though things get a little frosty when Murasaki mentions Teshin's possible intention of handing the foundry off to Kicho. If you recall, Kicho can rescue the player from being run over by the Rokotsu Express at the start of the game. With that, Teshin's grown tired of talking. But why would he hand over the foundry, which clearly has value, to the leader of a rival faction? No need to worry about that for now. Time to evict some peasants from a restaurant, the true spirit of Bushido. You'll meet Shiretoko at the shrine and then head straight to the restaurant. He'll caution the player to be on their guard. The Akadama clan have been poking their noses in things lately. Shiretoko will also instruct the player to do exactly as he says. No exceptions. Upon reaching Amaguri, the introduction is slightly influenced by whether you helped Don and Suzu earlier. The man will claim that he's disappointed in you. Suzu, however, in this instance only, will transform from a Meiji-era Japanese teenager into a 50-year-old New York pizzeria owner.
Why would I listen to a scammer like you? You smash up my restaurant. Mamma mia, what am I gonna do?
Apologies to Italy and the state of New York, but it's an amusing mistake that is strangely fixed in other instances. Post-outburst, Shiretoko will order one of his goons to, well, break stuff. By which I mean one of his goons will start repeatedly picking up a stool, throwing it, and then picking up another stool and throwing it, and so on and so forth. Orson Welles destroying that room in Citizen Kane, this is not. Though it does, bafflingly, last for about the same time. Seriously, this entire scene lasts for like 2 minutes, God knows why. Partway through, you're told to join in the festivities. Go ahead and grab a stool, pot, or manaki neko if you're feeling adventurous. just kind of toss things about. Kirikuchi is in the back, standing there, mind in a fugue state. I assume the length of the scene is a way of the game saying, if you don't agree with this, now is your chance to change your path. Now, God help you if you're trying to be a good little clan enforcer and happen to launch a stool right at Susu's face, because Don will not like that. Shiritoko will chastise you, Don will draw his blade, now you're fighting. Likewise, if you say, mistakenly whack Shiritoko with an errant Manaki Neko, he won't take kindly to it. Now you're fighting him and his goons. Doing so will end your relationship with the Kurou family in its entirety. But if you manage to keep your cool and toss chairs around for what feels like an eternity, Shiritoko will finally congratulate you on a job well done. Rather amusingly, some cutscenes have one of the thugs still carrying a stool with him on the way out from the store. If you did exactly as Shiritoko says, i.e. not fighting with Don, then he'll be pleased and give you the full reward of 50 ryo. If you don't follow instructions, you leave with nothing. I think it gives a little hint at Shiritoko's personality. He's a bad guy, sure, but there's some honor to him with him not wanting to hurt the people of the station. Afterwards, Shiritoko will tell you to meet him at the mansion later for another job. The job is taking Kintaro out for a stroll. This is Teshin and Murasaki's child. You're to act as a bodyguard on their sunset walkabout. Another interesting facet to Shiritoko is that if you comment that the baby's cute, he'll admit that he may not be as innocent when he's grown up in the Kurou household. Just another hint that maybe the man isn't someone who agrees with what the family's doing, but his loyalty to his master is what's keeping him around. You know what's coming though? One can't just take a baby out on a little jaunt without a kidnapping attempt occurring. Now let go, which I assume is meant to be now let's go. If you've had no interaction with the Akadama, you won't know that this is Kicho. Shiritoko is quick to fill you in and says that Kicho was his former master. Now things are kind of starting to make sense. Teshin had some form of relationship with Kicho. No points for guessing what that was. But for now, for some reason, Kicho went and built the Akadama. Capturing Teshin's son would be a valuable bargaining chip in taking over the foundry. You're tasked with keeping the kidnappers at bay for a set amount of time. When reinforcements arrive, Shiritoko commands that you take the baby and run. Hilariously, you then find yourself with Kintaro in your arms, forced to flee. Getting hit causes you to drop the baby. The crazy thing is, the game considers the baby a weapon. If you launch it at someone, it deals 40 damage. It's even printed in the guidebook. Now tell me any other game where you can use a baby as a missile. Comment down below, bet you can't. Rather than flee, it's easier to just focus on Hyuga. Whittle is held down enough, he'll withdraw. Baby saved, kinda. Teshin will congratulate you on fumbling his child like a greased up football. I'm sure it being dropped on its head won't cause too much lasting damage. Asking Teshin about Kicho will build on what we already know. Kicho was a child from a previous marriage. A rift seems to have occurred and now there are odds. Tomorrow, a government representative, Tamagawa, will arrive to purchase the Arayashiki foundry. On your way out, you can overhear a conversation between Shiritoko and an underling. Murasaki hasn't been seen for a while. Maybe she's gone to the shrine. And if we recall our other playthrough, it's tonight that she may well meet her end. So let's see what's going on. I get the feeling something a little fishy is going on here. You can sneakily follow Murasaki up the steps to find her speaking with a man. We know this is the town constable Inokashira. It's clear the two of them are having an affair. According to the guidebook, it may have been going on for some time. Though it's not confirmed, there's a dotted line linking Kintaro to Inokashira and Murasaki. Intruding on their little midnight rendezvous, you can confirm or deny whether you were eavesdropping. Either way, they plan on silencing you for good. That is, until Shiritoko appears. Rather ironically, he'll be interrogating Inokashira and you. When you tell the truth, Murasaki will attempt to shift blame to you, but you can bounce it right back. Shiritoko plans to report the matter to Teshin, but you can then ask him to pardon Murasaki. At such a pivotal time, a fracturing in the Kurou family ranks doesn't really do anyone any good. Murasaki will be thankful you managed to spare her life. Shiritoko welcomes you to fight by the family's side tomorrow. Inokashira, in another too literal translation, says, "It was scary." There were a lot of little choices packed into a relatively short scene. Because the only way out of the Kurou mansion is through the shrine, you'll always see Murasaki enter. If you follow her, the previous scene is one outcome. If you don't follow her, Shiritoko will always find her and then kill her. However, if you at any point attack Murasaki with Shiritoko not there, you will fight all three of them. The 3-on-3 battle is extremely tough, especially on higher difficulties. Because Inokashira has a gun, he'll be no-scoping you from afar, interrupting all your attacks. Naturally, you attack him. Decreasing his life past a certain point causes him to call in backup from his giant friend who clearly has some form of learning disability. Jose, as he's called, wields a giant pole and will mess you up. It's now a 4-on-1. If you're doing another type of playthrough, and have no reputation or a negative one with the Kurou family, you'll be fighting them all again. It's a decent battle for the spoils alone. You'll obtain Shiritoku, Murasaki, and Jose's weapon from the fight. In those instances, you're the one who, in an alternate reality, caused Murasaki's death. Kind of a strange bit of fatalism. Murasaki, in the majority of realities in which the player does not directly prevent it, will die. Come to the dawn of the second day, your goal is to head to the foundry. We're well aware that the Akadama clan is going to mount their attack today. If you slaughtered everyone at the shrine, the fall of the House of Kurou is well on its way, though it won't affect much. Earlier in the game, you can visit the foundry to learn a little more about it. One of the guards there will describe it as an iron foundry, built in the 8th year of the Meiji era, which was 2 years ago. Teshin sold off the western and southern areas of Rokotsu Pass in order to fund its construction. He then hired overseas engineers and purchased materials in order to build what the game calls the Aryan Model Foundry for manufacturing iron. The man claims that Aryan was the name of the engineer who built it. However, its operation, along with being difficult, came at great cost, so Teshin shut it down. Its construction had brought workers to Rokotsu Pass, but they've long since moved on. Not only will the foundry be sold, but that deal includes all of the pass, including the town, hence the breaking of stuff to enact an eviction. Technically, Suzu's a filthy squatter. Interestingly, it was the construction of the blast furnace that brought dawn to the town a couple of years ago. The presence of the furnace and its lackluster effects are rooted in actual history. It was mainly German engineering that helped construct them. I assume that Rokotsu Pass may have a mine. Either that, or the railway was to bring materials in or perhaps take them out. Given the time frame the game is set in, at the time, the technology was not fully developed, so often ran into issues as we have here. It paints a sad picture of the house of Kurou and Teshin. Perhaps he knew the end of the samurai era was coming. He sold off a chunk of land that had been with his family for years in order to revitalize the town. In the beginning, it may have looked positive, but those dreams soon turned to ash. Close down the foundry, shun your eldest son, watch your little empire wither, only to have it come to the very government responsible for causing all this to strike a deal. Teshin's got the weight of an entire family resting on his shoulders. On top of that, his wife's cheating on him, and the little missile Kentaro might not even be his biological son. At least he's got Shiritoko, unless the player, didn't kill him. Quite a sad state of affairs all round. Now you stand side by side with Teshin as he attempts to clear one of the last obstacles from his path, his own son. I reckon the big man's actions are all bravado here. That's what happens when you're cooked by the popo. Seriously, he's a bit of a sad sight. He sends you off to the railroad while he faces off with his son. Like a number of Day 2 activities, there's often a gauntlet of sorts. Tsubohachi finally shows his bald head again, leaving the two of you to clash with the Akadama forces. After a time, 2 Akadama elites will arrive. Chelsea, the British girl, who you may have encountered already, and Karibe. On hard difficulty with a weapon you're not overly familiar with, this can be a difficult fight. Leaving Tsubohachi alone with either of them can lead to a quick death, so I hope you've not been partying instead of studying the blade. Successfully defeating Karibe and Chelsea, along with gaining access to their weapons, allows you to rush back to the foundry to support Teshin. Both him and his son have, for no other reason than it being Kino, are facing off on the top of the furnace. In a somewhat sweet moment, Teshin refuses to attack his son, stating that the battle is already over and it would be dishonorable. But you know what's not dishonorable? Getting us to kill his son. In a beautiful piece of meta game design, we can see Teshin's internal struggle of not wanting his son to die, at odds with his duties as the leader of the Kurou, by him constantly blocking the fucking camera. My god, the dude is just always wandering around the frustratingly tight space, stupid ponytail blocking your view of Kicho. It results in the guy getting a ton of free hits on you. It drove me crazy. You can technically bait Kicho down the ladder if he doesn't launch you off the foundry first. I'm all for cool cinematic battles, I get the intention, but this is just poorly executed. When you finally deliver the killing blow to Kicho, you can pilfer his awesome sword. Teshin will thank you, believing it's better for his son to die so as not to see the coming of an age without samurai. All that's left is to sign the treaty with the government. I'm sure that will go absolutely fine. Back at the manor, Tamagawa has managed to hold himself back from ordering his men to pull a girl apart like a fleshy cheese string, just long enough to talk business. Hold your tongue during negotiations or don't. Your call. Despite Teshin wanting to play the good host, Tamagawa's on a tight schedule. There is, however, just enough time for his one-act play, the death of his samurai family. We have been betrayed, gasp. The government is attacking the mansion, no choice but to make our glorious last stand. You will fight through a bunch of enemies until Teshin orders you to Ipponmatsu on the trail of Tamagawa. In the clearing are a number of cannoneers. The trajectory of these cannons is about as strong as an octogenarian with a prostate the size of a melon taking a piss. It's pathetic. What's crazy is the serious amount of damage they can cause. You're tasked with taking out a bunch more soldiers until Shiritoko orders you to the town. Surprise, surprise, it's Tsubohachi, but something's up. If you remember the previous ending, there's a certain sneaky someone who's yet to make an appearance. Hyuga, the government spy. This is where he enters the stage. Now you're facing off against him and his ninja. I ended up delivering the killing blow in Amaguri. It's what Suzu would have wanted. Tsubohachi orders you to the area of the final showdown, the bridge. You and Teshin stand before Tamagawa. The general's impressed by our tenacity. Both you and Teshin have to make Tamagawa's life forfeit. You can waste your time dealing with the foot soldiers, though it makes much more sense to just head straight for your target. If you battle him in the radish patch, you can time kicks when you're low on health. This will send a vegetable flying up into the air. I did this at the end of a combo, catching the root vegetable in my mouth like a well-trained dog. But because I'm such a cool dude, I let Teshin get the final blow. Totally didn't steal my kill. Whatever. Despite Tamagawa's death, the tide of the government agents does not cease. They surround you both. The player and Teshin make their last stand. The battle rages for several days. Invariably, the government army takes over the Kurou mansion and the foundry. Soon, the rest of Rokotsu Pass follows. Refusing to surrender, the Kurou fought until exterminated. At the same time, another rebellion, known as the Seinen War, or the Satsuma Rebellion I mentioned earlier, occurred. Its conclusion marked the end of the samurai. Thus, Ending 4 has been unlocked. Maybe, in another world, things could have ended differently. This won't particularly be a long section, he says at the moment of writing, but I did want to bring up Way of the Samurai's translation. I say translation and not localization because there's a distinction. Localization requires a person to take the text in another language and transform it into the target language in a way that feels natural to the reader, speaker, viewer, whatever. There's absolutely a lot of skill and hard work to this. You're required to understand context, character, backgrounds, the world, the writer's original intention, etc. I genuinely fear for the future where people and companies think you can simply leave this to some LLM. There's a fitting quote from Oscar Wilde which says that a man knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. That is what this potential LLM AI bubble feels like. A bunch of people who only see numbers without the ability to see
past the numbers,
if you will. There was a job I saw posted on LinkedIn not too long ago that had people assisting LLM translation. There would be a translated line of dialogue and you would pick several options that would be the best fit for the context. Scary times. The era up to the PS2 and a little beyond was also scary for localization, but for other reasons. Depending on the company, a game's localization could be rather bare bones or lackluster. Pin it to budget, lack of resources, not really caring about the demographic. Some localization efforts faltered for a number of reasons. On the whole, I think more JRPG or text-heavy games did get more care and attention. For the most part, Tales, Final Fantasy and a number of other games fared just fine in the 90s and early 2000s. These days, as I've said before, Final Fantasy, Sega and the Trails series often have really great localization work, but Way of the Samurai, given it falls into that early 2000s era, exudes a kind of Shenmue effect. Let's call it the IC localization. If you've played games around this time, particularly JRPGs, you may have seen IC thrown around a lot.
I see.
Often the sentence is uttered by the protagonist after some NPC's vomited up information or a revelation occurs. Why I see? I'm not going to check Shenmue in Japanese, but what tends to end and start a lot of conversations in Japanese is the classic like so desu, so desu ne, sokka, naruhodo. Sure, you can localize that to I see, as in the information of which you have just conveyed to me has been absorbed, understood. Now I'm going to verbally communicate that to you, 80-year-old Japanese man. It's fine. Hell, it's functional, but you're not really embracing localization. It's this I see vibe I get from Way of the Samurai. If the info on Moby Games is to be believed, translation for the game was contracted to a company called Arbol Inc. They no longer exist anymore. They merged with another company. That company specialized in Japanese to English translation, mainly in the technical field, but took on other projects. I'm guessing they took on Way of the Samurai because, and this is no shade or disrespect, this translation does not sound like a native speaker. Way of the Samurai has such an odd way of constructing its sentences, whether it's the menu, information, character dialogue. Like, one of the first things you'll hear, well, see, a character say is, "Oh no." In what world does that fit the context of the scene? Subohachi is this gruff Yankee. He's not scared in the least of Don and the powers of disco. Just look at the scene.
Hey!
Don says wait, and then Subohachi gives this guttural ugh. In what world does that become oh no? It completely screws with the dynamic of the scene. Like, either keep him quiet or say you again, or anything. At least you again, though not strictly implied, does add a bit of subtext to the scene. All the translation is so straightforward and technically correct, but it just lacks soul. That's the difference between translation and localization. There's no attempt to conjure or capture character through dialogue. For a game that lives and dies by its narrative, I generally think it does the game a disservice and misses such a big opportunity. While it speaks to other flaws with Way of the Samurai, it feels like characters are trying to claw their way out of this pit and a boot keeps smashing them in the face. Subohachi needs to talk like a Majima or those random punk NPCs from the Like a Dragon series. Murasaki needs a more conniving Ice Queen moment when she talks. They could have played with Don's fluency in Japanese, which he states he has trouble with, like they did with that Dutch monk from Samurai Champloo. Instead, you get stuff like, "It was scary," uttered by Inokashira. I've not looked into the translation yet, but I'm gonna bet my waifu body pillow that "kowakatta" or "kowai" or some variation for scary appears there. Wow. Now that I was not expecting, and an absolute testament to how this translation was butchered. Kuwabara kuwabara is like an old protective mantra. In England at least you say, like knock on wood, touch wood, to prevent something bad from happening. In this case, maybe God's help me would have been fine. Opinions will differ, but still, originally you had something colloquial, period relevant, and potentially displaying character, and it's replaced with something bland and not even grammatically correct for the context. I could literally go through the game and just get annoyed finding examples, so let's not do that. I absolutely empathize with the translator. Time may have been short, not enough budget, etc. They even seem to have had an English advisor for all the good that did. But two things are clear. If a game ever needed a retranslation project, this would be a prime candidate. Localization is such a valuable process to bring life into your game. Speaking of bringing life into your game, let's look at taking some life from hapless NPCs with the Akadama family. The next time stepping through the portal thing they used in Terminator sees us transform into Ayame, the instructor skin from the game's tutorial. Through endings 2, 3 and 4, I'd say we've developed quite a low opinion of the Kurou family, and Subohachi in particular, so why not introduce him and his goons to our Naginata? I specifically chose the weapon as a nod to Tenchu-zan's Onamusha, those female house guards who wield the same weapon, plus it's got insane range and damage output. Joining the Akadama clan is a rather simple affair, but doing it cleanly may not be straightforward. Normally, where the samurai pushes you towards the people of the station or the Kurou. Asking to join the Kurou will see you tied to the tracks, potentially to be rescued by Kicho and Chelsea. You're not locked into any early choices you make by any means, but I feel the first time around, players may stick to the more straightforward routes. To join, you must first visit the Akadama clan's compound. On your way, you'll run into a core of their samurai. Their leader is kind enough to lay out their goals: defeat the Meiji government, defeat the Kurou family. I'd start with the latter point, to be honest. The government has a few people on their side, a lofty goal. If you played through the other endings of the game, you can imagine the ultimate fate of this endeavour. Not to mention, historically, factually, we know where this kind of thinking leads, but maybe there's a little more going on than we first think. So far, we've only really brushed our fingers against the Akadama clan's plot threads. Asking to join the clan sees you told to return later. Kicho isn't here. Even if you met him via the alternate train route, he's still not here because time hasn't progressed. He's out with Chelsea. Upon leaving the compound, a familiar face, Hyuga, appears along with Karibe. Despite being in the past for only a month, the Akadama clan has already amassed a supposedly formidable force. You're now free to kill time in any way you see fit, for instance, trying to make money. You can't sell any of the swords you acquire, nor can you hold any items. Making money comes in the form of looting enemies, completing missions, such as helping Don or Shiritoko, or kicking off with Yamamoto in the foundry. This leads to a series of battles against a maximum of 100 foes. They'll just keep coming and coming, with one of them occasionally blurting out how many fresh corpses you've created. The point of this is to acquire weapons, money, upgrade scrolls, and learn moves. It's certainly a viable method, but for all the points mentioned, it's gonna take a fair chunk of time, especially on higher difficulties. Just before the transition to the afternoon, if you're currently in the town, your new clansman will appear. Hyuga's got a bit of friendly advice. Leave the pass. You're screwing up our plan. No, not the government's plan, the Akadama plan. What are you saying? Don't be silly. Where was I? So yeah, even if this is your first time through, alarm bells should be ringing about this Hyuga character. He leaves you with a final warning and then departs. What I do find rather hilarious is that you can literally walk away from him and he'll get pissy with you. You should not leave in the middle of my warning. Or you'll do what, mate? He sounds like an angry school teacher. Funnily enough, if you head to the shrine first thing, your character will stumble upon a meeting between Hyuga and the government official, although I'm not sure if it's the player that sees Hyuga or the camera, because you can't then bring this up later on. A cat tips him off to your presence and Hyuga, being the ninja that he is, vanishes. Incidentally, there's another scene that a number of people may not have witnessed because it requires you to double back to the bridge before lunch. Here you'll find Inokashira chatting with a government agent. We know what ultimately happens to Inokashira. He dies by our hand or the government. Inokashira is nothing but a pawn, and not a smart one. Openly conspiring in front of the community radish patch doesn't paint him as the smartest tool in the shed. Maybe he's got other stuff going on for him that makes him such a hit with Lady Murasaki. Returning to the Akadama compound, you're introduced to the whole gang. If Kicho and Chelsea met you before, they'll comment on it. If not, they're rather indifferent. Hyuga keeps quiet. A rift seems to be growing. Karibe wants to attack the Kurou as soon as possible, whereas Kicho's rather hesitant. Maybe they're not yet fully prepared. Maybe he still has some lingering feelings towards his father. Hyuga sides with Karibe, because of course he would. That snake, fanning the flames of discord. Words are exchanged. Your character, who just joined by the way, is privy to this meeting of the generals. Soon the sound of conversation is replaced by that of drawn steel. You're outside. It's all about to kick off. Both Karibe and Kicho are ready to go to blows. Chelsea turns to you, who again just got here, and asks you to do something. There are a number of paths you could take. You can side with Karibe, which results in a brawl between Chelsea, Kicho, and Hyuga, that flip-flopper. However, you can't outright kill them, only damage them and potentially grab their weapons. They're still plot critical. You can choose to fight Karibe in Kicho's place. Karibe has some extremely powerful moves, but is weak to spacing and thrusting attacks. What makes it infuriating is that the game will not draw your sword. Karibe starts right next to you and always gets in a free hit. If too much of your health is depleted, Kicho steps in and finishes him off. It's a decent way to get access to Karibe's sword. However, you're now one elite swordsman down for the inevitable battle. But if you reduce Karibe's health and then talk to him, you can get him to surrender, thus making him available later on. Hyuga will congratulate you, kiss ass. Afterwards, Hyuga will speak with Chelsea, claiming clan morale is low and that the Akadama must act soon. She's not too talkative, probably thinking about Kicho, who she's clearly in love with. With the transition to night, it may seem like your work with the Akadama clan is done for the day. However, you can return at night to the railroad and find Chelsea. She's planning to assassinate Teshin and wants to enlist your help. You can agree or not. If you do, you won't get very far before she runs into Subohachi. You'll all fight. It ends with Chelsea having to retreat after being found out. Regardless whether you do this little mission or not, Chelsea will always fail, as is commented on by another character later. If you like, you can choose to gatecrash Murasaki and Inokashira's rendezvous, then slaughter them all. It doesn't affect the Akadama plot to any noticeable degree, but I always enjoy skewering Inokashira. The next day rolls around. You report to the Akadama clan base to enact the final assault. After speaking with Kicho, he wants to spy on Daddy, so you head towards the Kurou estate. On your way, who should you find but Hyuga on his way up to the shrine? I don't know why this place is so damn popular with clandestine meeting. I'm surprised Murasaki, Inokashira, Shiritoko, a government official, and Hyuga haven't all run into each other over the past month. It'd be like a bunch of closeted businessmen in the 50s running into each other at a gay bathhouse, just awkwardly exchanging glances, all knowing why they turned up but too afraid and embarrassed to say anything. Chances are Murasaki had been feeding information to Inokashira, who'd then passed it along to the government, who'd then conveyed it to the Meiji government. With the intention of taking over the pass, they dispatched Hyuga to put a plan in motion by getting in touch with Kicho. However, despite everyone's elite training, they're awful at espionage. You catch Hyuga and the government official red-handed. The plan is, or was, to basically get both rival factions to destroy each other. As we've seen in the other endings, left unattended, they'll do exactly that. Then the government sweeps in for the mercy kill. This time around, you get the drop on the government. You and Kicho will battle Hyuga, the official, and a bunch of ninja. Only the man himself really matters. Kicho's skill and moveset me seems one of the few characters you can leave alone to do his thing. An interesting point is that not only does your sword have durability, but so does your opponent. You can sometimes see the sparks of steel during a combo, indicating they just lost a portion of their stamina. If they continue, the sword itself will eventually become ineffective. Defeating Hyuga has him deliver the usual dying villain spiel of all your efforts will be in vain. The government has already won. He then pulls off the old jibaku, blowing himself up in what amounts to an explosion akin to a sad firework. With the deception discovered, Kicho wants to warn his father of the government's intentions and stop the bloodshed. You, meanwhile, will head back to the mansion to warn them about the upcoming government assault. Kicho visits his father. If you killed a bunch of Teshin's people, they'll all be absent. Along with delivering the news, perhaps Kicho can even repair the rift within his family. What's amusing here is that Who's Alive slightly alters the reason for the betrayal. A random underling who seems surprisingly knowledgeable about military stratagems will claim it was an attempt to drive a rift between both clans and have them fight. This is the correct answer. However, if Murasaki is still alive, she'll claim it's because the government doesn't want to pay the money to Teshin for the foundry. While both are true, during the Kurou family route, you may notice someone was absent at negotiations. I'll give you a second. Got it? You are correct. It was baby Kintama all along. The mastermind is the true puppet master behind the government. No. Murasaki was absent. Though it's not explicitly stated, I like to think that she'd already moved on to General Tamagawa. She acts as the mole, gets herself a cushy life, maybe with Tamagawa, after this whole past nonsense blows over. Unfortunately, we'll never know. There's a man on the grassy knoll. Armed with a rifle, he guns down Teshin. The patriarch of the Kurou family is now just another casualty. Kicho runs back to the Akadama mansion. Everyone prepares for battle. As with the ending fights before, it's a gauntlet of several maps. Fight all the waves of guards, hang around for the second if you like, then head to the next screen. Firstly, you'll fight in the courtyard with Chelsea. Keeping her alive on high difficulties is next to impossible. A number of the guards are armed with the same Naginata weapon that you can wield. This thing can just output insane damage. It will melt Chelsea's HP unless you're actively keeping these dudes away from her. On hard difficulty, I just couldn't keep her alive past the first wave of enemies. Not that it makes a world of difference, but there is a subtle change later on. You'll next find yourself by the railroad. Karibe was so happy for my support, he immediately drove his foot into my spine. Guess he's still harboring a few feelings of frustration from when I handed his ass to him earlier. Again, you'll battle your way through the map until, having slaughtered enough guards, you'll be ushered onwards to join with Kicho. The next battle takes place in the little station village. The large guys, and I do mean large, they're like 7 feet tall, have an insane amount of HP. Keep in mind, I'm using a weapon with maxed attack here. It's barely tickling them. They just stand there grunting at the inconvenience. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, you and Kicho will rush towards the bridge. As it was in Teshin's side of the narrative, soldiers and cannoneers line the way forward. Attempting to press on often sees you get a face full of cannonball. Tamagawa and his mustache will be waiting for you at the other side. You get a little Kino moment when a couple of soldiers fire on Kicho, only for him to instant transmission. Nothing personnel kid out of the bullet's path. But if back in the courtyard you stayed with Chelsea and defeated the second wave of enemies, she'll get an injury. Then she'll appear here and attempt to shield Kicho from a hail of gunfire. It doesn't quite work out for her. She's riddled with bullets, dying in her ballerina-like pose. Regardless, it's a showdown with Tamagawa. Landing the killing blow, which I did by stabbing him full force in the dick, by the way, brings the path to a close. Despite their leader perishing, the government army doesn't let up. You and Kicho make your last stand on the bridge against a literal army of foes. Due to Teshin's death, their house soon falls. Despite their valiant efforts, so too does the Akadama clan. Rokotsu Pass, once again, falls into the hands of the government. At least you all died with some honor, eh? If only there was another way. I'll use this section to clear up a few extras around the game that don't warrant an entire section themselves. I'm talking about sound, character design, and some of the various unlocks in the game. Let's start with one of the game's design tenets I mentioned way back when talking about Way of the Samurai's development, wanting to create characters that look like they'd stepped out of some 2000s MTV fashion show. That was one of Nakanishi's missions, and I've been saying his name quite a bit. If someone out there recognized it, it may well be because he would go on to be the director of Resident Evil 7 at Capcom. Even before that, he'd been a designer for Resi 5 and directed a bunch of other games at Acquire like Shinobido. Nakanishi, combined with Acquire's veterans like Yumiko Sugiyama and Toshio Koike, along with others, really captured a samurai visual kei aesthetic. In terms of pure drip, it has to go to the Akadama clan. I love Karibe's design. It's pure 2000s edgelord. The dreads, flames, spiked forearms. It hovers between the Meiji period and early 2000s Shibuya. Kichio's fit deserves a mention too. The mesh vest and fur-lined jacket with those shiny white shoes. It gave me flashes of Shigi from Tenchu-zan. Even Chelsea's design manages to carry that red motif, fusing British aristocracy with Japanese fashion. On the Kurou side, each member has some kind of flower or plant motif running through their clothes. Shiritoko has a little peach on his haori. Subohachi has what looks like either roses or chrysanthemums on his arm. Murasaki has them along her kimono. Teshin's design is great too, the most prototypical samurai, fitting with his attempts to cling to the past. On the villager's side of things, Dojima has his little specs, contrast well with his giant frame and hammer. He looks like a dude who could probably do your taxes before pulling your arms out of their sockets if you didn't pay. Suzu looks cute and innocent, Don's more of a caricature than human. From the government camp, Inokashira's design makes me want to smash his face whenever he's on screen, so I'll give Acquire props for that. He's a weasel of a man, whereas Hyuga exudes a cool, calculating aura thanks to his more neutral colours and hairstyle. Finally, the government ninja design reminds me of the sneaking suit from one of the MGS games. They're all really great and memorable. It's just a shame we couldn't do a little more with our chosen protagonist. It would have been nice to maybe play around with the fashion a little more, wear something other than a yukata or cosplay as some serial killer robot. That said, Way of the Samurai style does go some way into distracting you from the rather bland and uninteresting environment. If you get bored or impatient when it comes to hacking people down in the game's story, you can unlock one-on-one battles within an arena. You and a friend, or you and the CPU, can pick from an expanding roster of characters and go at it in some of the most bafflingly designed areas I've ever seen. Firstly, the characters. You get obvious ones like Teshin and Kichio, down to more obscure NPCs like Jose and the random thugs. But why, when allowed to choose Kirikuchi or Suzu, would you not always select them? I like to think of them both finally having a chance to enact their revenge on those who've been terrorizing them in Rokotsu Pass. Each character can wield their weapon from the game or an appropriate weapon if they don't typically use one. These weapons have their own stats too, though you are free to pick whatever sword, saw, or axe you desire. The mode is perfect for testing out new weapons you've acquired, as well as brushing up on various skills before tackling another playthrough. Just be careful of the arena you choose. They get a little wacky or outright mental. There's one where you're knee-deep in water for the entire bout. You can hardly move. Then there's just this platform in the center. You can also bath on top of the train that may have run you over several times in the game. It makes for a pretty narrow arena, so I guess this is Way of the Samurai playing with the conventions of a versus fighter. You can even step into a sumo ring on the moon. You can spy a Japanese flag and what may be a Hachiko replica. What better place to have Kirikuchi mercilessly slaughter Suzu with an axe? The way he screams and groans like he's just taken a swift kick to his ancient nuts never stops bringing a smile to my face. Either that or he sounds like you just stepped in on him being finished off at a massage parlor. I did enjoy setting up a rematch between Kirikuchi and the Akadama thug who originally accosted him in the game. It felt satisfying skewering the guy while a cat watched on. I also had Suzu formally reject Don's advances with steel in one of the mode's more sensible arenas. A number of the other stages will actively obscure your view and make it impossible to play properly. How it got past any kind of testing phase is beyond me. All in all, the mode is quite fun, more so for its comedic rematches and the ability to try out weapons, rather than the strength of its one-on-one combat. For music, we have Noriyuki Asakura returning. After going through the rest of the Tenchu games without his tunes, playing Way of the Samurai feels like being wrapped in a warm musical blanket while someone wails in your ear. For the moment you hear the intro, which shifts like several musical styles under 20 seconds, you can sense Noriyuki's unmistakable style. Like his work on the Tenchu series, it never ties itself to a particular period or location. A breadth of instrumentation and styles imbue it with a timeless quality. It never feels anachronistic to the game. Within the context of Way of the Samurai, it becomes very much a part of its world. There are certain instruments I've come to associate with this style. The French horn, echoey synths and strings, the sitar, flamenco guitar, harmonics. You could slam this OST into Tenchu and it'd still work, and I say that as a positive thing. It has an ethereal, dreamlike quality to it, almost like some mantra. It won't surprise you that he's been a mainstay at Acquire and has worked on the Tenchu series beyond the studio. What may come as a surprise is that he was also the composer of Sekiro. I couldn't think of anyone better. I've always viewed it as a spiritual successor to the series anyway. What I will say is that I've always found his work on the Tenchu, Way of the Samurai and Shinobido series more authentic, or distinct. You know it's him, like with Uematsu or Sakuraba. You listen to one piece from a soundtrack and it has their stamp on it. His other work, while great, feels like some of that edge has been filed down. I'll quickly have a few favourites play us out. Sometimes online referred to as the golden path or ultimate ending, you may have received some hints from other playthroughs as to what this is pointing to. The houses of Kurou and Akadama by themselves are not strong enough to face the might of the government. Apes together strong. To create a situation where both houses have the potential to unite requires you to develop relationships with the two clans. The easiest way to do this is to help Don at the beginning of the game when Suzu is kidnapped. You must then introduce yourself to the Akadama faction. It tells you to return in the evening to meet with Kicho. After this, you then take a trip to the Kurou residence. Slightly chagrined but recognizing your strength, Subohachi will allow you to visit Teshin. As was done in the original Kurou path, Murasaki has you once again test your skill against Shiritoko. Beat him, meet him at the shrine, head to Wamaguri. Once again, break stuff. Don't screw up. Shiritoko will be pleased and invite you to return to the house later for another job. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to meet with Kicho. The meeting takes place once again. Karibe gets salty, everyone takes it outside. You step in, spank Karibe, but spare his life, despite him getting that shameful first hit in. During the night, head to the shrine and gatecrash Murasaki and Inokashira's little rendezvous. Spill the extramarital tryst to Shiritoko, spare Murasaki's life, again, apes together strong. The next day rolls around. We're not heading to the foundry. Instead, we're siding with Kicho. As with the Akadama path, the two of you will stumble upon Hyuga and the government official plotting at the shrine. Everything kicks off. Hyuga blows himself up. However, when you transition to the next scene, you may notice a cutscene is missing. Specifically, the cutscene where Kicho speaks with his father Teshin. In this instance, there is no gunman on the grassy knoll. Teshin still lives. When you reach the Akadama compound, government agents flood the scene. Unlike last time where you would fight with Chelsea and then, by the railroad, support Karibe, both of them are now present and alive. The three of you make your way to the railroad, where a seemingly unending army of government agents continues to assail the Akadama forces. With seemingly no end in sight, who turns up to lend a hand but Subohachi and Shiritoko, the enemy of my enemy and all that. Everyone bros out, battling side by side to turn the tides of fate in the hopes of not only preserving Rokotsu Pass, but the way of the samurai. After a while and a bit of mutual backslapping, the team divides. You can team up with either Subohachi or with Chelsea. Either choice has no effect on the ending, only your next battle arena. I went with Subohachi to the foundry. Another gauntlet of guards attempts to block your advance. Once the death meter has reached a certain point, Subohachi and Shiritoko will urge you to go and help Teshin. Both Teshin and Kicho, father and son, fight side by side on the Bridge of Fate. Tamagawa stands behind his rifleman. There's some aura farming when both Teshin and Kicho slice the enemy's bullets right out of the very air. You then join in the fray, slicing with abandon until enough government agents lay dead or dying on the ground. Oops, sorry about that one, Kicho. You know how it gets in the heat of battle, red mist and all. When you're not skewering your comrades and have repainted the bridge a lovely shade of red, Tamagawa finally unsheathes his sword. It's a 3-on-1 battle. The general doesn't stand a chance. The battle's a lot of fun. I love how whenever there aren't enough guards, your allies will just stand around watching you fight like in a schoolyard. Upon taking enough damage, Tamagawa will tuck his tail between his legs and withdraw. You're ordered to pursue him, finally putting an end to the conflict. Once again, you find yourself at the shrine, just you and Tamagawa, or so you may think, because on your trek up the stairs, a bunch of ninja will drop in to bar your path. You don't have to fight them, it'll make the next part of the plot slightly easier though. Whether a trail of corpses litter the path to the shrine or not, this marks your final confrontation with Tamagawa. The general will attempt to initiate conversation with you. There's nothing he can say that we want to hear. The time for talk is over. Let's finish this. The way of the samurai versus the steam engine of progress. The battle's much easier now that there's no chance of an errant sword or boot catching you, and the arena is thankfully devoid of anything you can stumble over. Take your time, wait for openings, deliver the final blow. Then, if you're smart, pillage Tamagawa's sword and add it to your arsenal. It's the only way to get it. Tamagawa's dead, baby. Soon after, the Kurou and Akadama alliance are able to lay waste to the government army. Reportedly, 5,000 troops perished. It would come to be known as the Battle of Rokotsu. We're led to believe this battle brought about an end to the Meiji government. preserving the status quo of the samurai in Japanese society. Also, for some unbeknownst reason, it also led to Don's head floating in the sky like some benevolent god. I assume he tried to rob the house and Teshin killed him, but he's happy as a ghost, so I don't know what to tell you. Thus, we've earned ending 1, all is right in the world. But what if, after all the effort banding both sides together, we'd have taken a different path? You can make 95% of the choices exactly the same, but when you reach the shrine to defeat Tamagawa, let's hear what he has to say. You introduce yourself, Tamagawa extends an offer, let him go, and we can earn ourselves a cushy position in the Meiji government. Sounds like a no-brainer. Tamagawa survives the battle, only to return a few days later with a lethal counter-offensive. Overwhelming numbers combined with modern firepower soon puts the little uprising in Rokotsu Pass to bed. The government takes over the land, but who will govern here? Why? The player, of course. Unfortunately, it does not last long. A few remaining samurai in the area administer a rather painful death. That's the end of that. Well done, government scum. You just earned ending 6. That's all of them. Or is it? But they were, all of them, deceived, for there was another ending. Interdimensional murder robots aside, I do want to slightly dissect the endings of this game in an attempt to uncover what I think is the most fitting end to Way of the Samurai. To look at Way of the Samurai's endings broadly, it's easy to think of ending number 1, having Kurou and Akadama unite to repel the government, as the golden path. It technically requires the most effort, and for the player to consider both groups' relationships. Chances are, the majority of players won't get this the first time around. However, let's just step back and take a look at the bigger picture here. That ending sees the player help continue the status quo of the samurai. Times were changing. The samurai being this special caste with dominion over others is not a good thing. Just look at Rokotsu Pass as a microcosm. Teshin is not some benevolent samurai. He rules with fear, allowing his thugs to bully and intimidate the dwindling populace. Whatever intention he had in bringing the foundry to Rokotsu, sustaining his family, making money, the environment he's trying to preserve does not benefit the average citizen. Subohachi is a punk who would have done God knows what to Suzu if we or Don weren't there. Sooner or later, that would have boiled over. Shiritoko has some admirable qualities, his loyalty and attempts to resolve the eviction peacefully. In the end, he's just as complicit as Teshin by being his enforcer in Rokotsu Pass. Murasaki is scheming and conniving. Does she even care about her child, or only about using people for their perceived benefit? Their lone ending finishes with their house being destroyed and the government winning. But when taken into consideration with the monster that we know General Tamagawa to be, a village still under Kurou rule seems like a more palatable option for some. Akadama, while not quite as bad, is far from perfect. Kichio and Chelsea are perhaps the most redeemable of the bunch. The former at least seems to possess honor and a cool head, at least when he's not planning to kidnap his half-brother. Chelsea, blinded by love, is willing to chance an assassination attempt on Teshin. Karebe is violent and impulsive. Even if they defeat the Kurou clan, how long would it be before he's decided that he's had enough of being on Kichio's leash? Not to mention his troops harass the townsfolk. The king is dead, long live the king. Once again, their path ends in subjugation. These are not good people, not by a long shot. After pushing the government back, could they seriously create a better life for the people of Rokotsu Pass? I doubt it. Infighting, betrayal, peace would be temporary. It'll all just boil over soon enough. Karebe and Murasaki would see to that. Endings 1, 4 and 5 are viewing the clans through rose-tinted glasses. The Way of Bushido is supposed to be about honor, loyalty, temperance, not extortion, backstabbing and violence. This type of jidaigeki or chambara is twisting the themes of the genre, purposely so. Both families are dealing with changing societal roles. The sense of rising up is a dream. Dojima's right when he says that the innocent always suffer, because those are the ones you should be saving. Out of all the endings, I find number 3 to be the most fitting. Suzo and Kirikuchi are the true innocents here. Ending 2 has you teaming up and escaping with Subohachi. In my mind, that dude has not done enough to redeem himself. You really want to be traveling with him and Suzu? Dojima and Don being casualties kind of makes sense. The former, a grizzled war veteran who would give his life to rescue a girl and give them a chance at a better life. Don, whose love for Suzu convinces him to make the ultimate sacrifice to save her. Plus, he didn't look too depressed as a disembodied head floating in the sky like the sun from the Teletubbies. In all the chaos, all the warring factions, the bloodshed, you, the lone Ronin, barely making it out of a town, engulfed in violence born from greed and ambition, accompanied by an innocent old man and his surrogate daughter, feels right. To me, that story of a wandering warrior managing to eke out a bit of good in a rapidly changing world is the Way of the Samurai. But how innocent is Kirikuchi really? Because you may miss this one. Way back when talking about the first ending, I mentioned a waraningyo stapled to a sacred tree. It's an old practice. Typically, it's a woman who performs the ritual. Typically, you may point the finger at Murasaki. I can't blame you. She's the type, but she wants Teshin alive, either to sell the foundry or feed information to the government. They're the ones who are going to do the hard work. No, my money's on our old, supposedly dementia-ridden grandpapa. He knows the old ways. The curse's influence is said to affect the area around the shrine. Wouldn't you just know it? The Kurou estate is just one screen over. Not only that, on the morning of the second day, you can take a trip to the shrine and who should you find but Kirikuchi? He plays all innocent, says he's here to stare at the Buddha statue thinking of Suzu, but I see through him. He's been here through the night, enacting his curse. They say it takes 7 days for it to take full effect. Today is that day, the day where Teshin and this pass will die. Or, not. It's just my conspiracy theory. This whole place is rotten. Better to get out while you can. With that said, the way a player gets out can also have an effect on not just the ending but the rank you receive. Earning ranks and gaining points through actions is how you unlock special items such as battle modes, more training modes, characters, and cosmetics. Playing on hard gives you the biggest boost of base points, while playing in a certain way unlocks new ending titles which in turn bestow points. Think of it like the ranks you get in the Metal Gear Solid games. How far you play into the game, how many people you kill, how many times you draw your sword, your responses, if you keep your sword sheathed, how much time you spend playing, it all contributes to your title. For example, on ending 2 of the game, I earned Ultimate Samurai. You achieve this by keeping your honor high, not killing more people than you need to, keeping good relationships with people, etc. It's quite an opaque system. Gaining new titles, it's best to think of it like a sliding scale. If you do good things, your honor goes up. Do bad things like killing a bunch of people randomly, attacking innocents and whatnot, it'll go down. Other ranks require a bit more work, like accumulating over 200 gold to be a rich samurai, killing as many people as you can to be dubbed a serial killer, or try to end the game with as little honor as possible. It certainly adds another layer of replayability to the game, though I can imagine some of the tight borders between ranks may leave a number of players a little frustrated. As the credits roll, I'll look back on Way of the Samurai as a bold yet flawed experience. Losing the rights to an established franchise would have most companies retreating to the safety of a spiritual successor. For Acquire to move away from the stealth genre entirely, acknowledge the limitations of budget, and roll the dice on an entirely new playstyle and genre took guts. The era of the PlayStation 2 was often seen as a time where game budgets could still be reasonable, allowing many smaller studios to experiment without fear of bankruptcy. Luckily for Acquire, their gamble paid off. Way of the Samurai would pave the way for further sequels, where they iterated on their relationship simulating jidaigeki film. The studio would even revisit the stealth genre in the interim. What disappoints me most about the game could be down to the constraints of the time, inexperience of the team in some aspects, and budget. From a narrative perspective, while it manages to conjure and play with the tropes of Chambara cinema, the characters just don't do enough to really bring the tale to life. There are interesting surfaces to each character, but there's just not enough opportunity to dig deeper, justify their existence, and add some shape to their one-note archetypes. A game like this, with its limited scope and cast, lives and breathes on its characters. Add into the mix a subpar localization effort and the world becomes even staler. Thank God there wasn't any voice acting. Combat, while fun and with a decent skill ceiling, suffers from an abundance of choice and yet harsh restrictions that limit experimentation. Leveling weapons and leveling movesets can be a chore for players wanting to discover all the game has to offer. The camera is often more interested in a random bit of shrubbery or the back of a character's head than the player or your opponent. Despite all that, Way of the Samurai was a game looking to break the mold offered by its peers at the time. As an experiment in narrative, player choice, freedom of expression and expectation, it served as a solid first draft of what would be built on via sequels. At the time, it felt like during this period, it was okay to be rough around the edges. You could stumble, be imperfect, as long as there was an element that hinted at something worth polishing. Acquire certainly saw that potential. The series has enjoyed a number of sequels all the way up to 2020. The mileage may well vary on how well the company built on the legacy of the first game, though these days Acquire's more well known for the equally excellent Octopath Traveler series and not so much Tenchu, Shinobido or Way of the Samurai, but who knows where the threads of fate will lead. Thanks for watching.